Imagine waking to a house of shadows, where 7 sisters, pure as untouched snow, evaporate into the mist, leaving beds cold as tombs and nightgowns hanging like ghosts. Was it human greed, or divine wrath for hidden sins? In 1899 Montana, evil wore a familiar face, and justice whispered from the grave. In the frost-kissed dawn of October 13, 1899, Selkirk, Montana, stirred under a sky heavy with unspoken omens. The Bitterroot Mountains loomed like ancient sentinels, their jagged peaks clawing at the heavens, as if guarding secrets buried deep in the earth. The air carried the sharp bite of pine resin mixed with the acrid smoke from smoldering hearths, a reminder that winter's grip was tightening. Roosters crowed sporadically, their calls echoing off wooden facades of saloons and mercantiles, while the distant rumble of or carts from the silver mines pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the town. But in the grand Victorian mansion on Elm Street, its turrets piercing the morning fog like fingers accusing the sky, something profane had occurred. 7 beds, meticulously made with crisp linen sheets folded at precise angles, stood empty. The pillows bore no imprint of heads that had rested there mere hours before. The rooms exhaled an unnatural stillness, the kind that presses on the chest like a biblical plague. Margaret, Catherine, the twins Eleanor and Elizabeth, Sarah, Grace and little Rebecca, the daughters of Gabriel Thornfield, had vanished. Not a splintered window frame, not a creak from a forced door, not even the whisper of a footprint in the dew-dampened grass outside. Their nightgowns draped over bedposts like shed skins, ethereal and untouched, as if the girls had been raptured skyward in a moment of divine selection, or pulled downward by infernal hands. The sheriff's ledger, locked away in federal vaults for 80 years like a sealed scroll from Revelation, hinted at a violation more sinister than mere absence. Each chamber had been rifled through with surgical precision. Drawers eased open without a scratch, wardrobes inspected without disturbance, hidden compartments beneath floorboards probed by fingers that knew every knot and nail of the house. Yet nothing pilfered. Not the pearl earrings Margaret cherished, not Catherine's silver paintbrushes, not even the few dollars tucked in Grace's ledger book. It was as if the intruder sought not treasures of gold, but souls themselves. What unholy pact had been struck in the dead of night? This wasn't mere disappearance. It was erasure, a void that screamed of Judgment Day come early to this frontier outpost. The 7 sisters of Selkirk joined the ranks of the damned, their story a parable of innocence corrupted, greed unchecked, and a conspiracy that slithered through the veins of America's westward expansion like the serpent in Eden. But before we descend into the abyss of this tale, where threads of human trafficking weave with strands of spiritual retribution, pause and reflect. Have you subscribed? Hit that bell to summon notifications for more chronicles of history's hidden horrors, where the past's ghosts demand reckoning. And in the comments below, share the shadows of your own family's untold stories. What mysteries linger in your lineage? Your voices resurrect these forgotten souls, binding us in a community against the darkness. The probe that ensued didn't merely chase phantoms. It unearthed a web of predators, ensnaring families across the untamed West. These were not random beasts but organized shadows, cloaked in respectability, trading in flesh under the guise of progress. Their operations echoed the biblical traffickers of old, selling Joseph into slavery for silver pieces. But here, the currency was frontier ambition, and the victims were daughters of the dust. Selkirk in 1899 teetered on the knife's edge of civilization and savagery. The wind howled down from the Bitterroots, carrying whispers of change, scents of charred wood from blacksmith forges, the earthy rot of fallen aspen leaves blanketing boardwalks, and the metallic bite of silver dust that coated everything, turning lungs to stone and dreams to fortune. This was no sleepy hamlet. The Northern Pacific Railroad had sliced through in '96, its iron tracks like veins pumping eastern blood into the heartland. Population ballooned to over 1,000, a mosaic of souls. Grizzled miners with calloused hands and haunted eyes, emerging from shafts that swallowed men whole. Merchants in starched collars, their ledgers fat with profits. Families fleeing eastern famines, their wagons creaking under the weight of hope. Main Street thrummed with life, horses clopping on mud-slicked roads, the clang of hammers on anvils, laughter spilling from the Golden Nugget Saloon where whiskey flowed like redemption. Lamplight flickered from mullioned windows as dusk fell, casting long shadows that danced like demons on the walls. Yet beneath this bustle lurked fractures. Old-timers versus newcomers, labor versus capital, faith versus folly. Mines birthed wealth but devoured lives. Cave-ins that crushed bodies like fragile covenants, strikes that turned brother against brother. And whispers grew of girls vanishing, lured by promises of city lights, their departures shrouded in lies, leaving mothers weeping into aprons stained with regret. At the epicenter stood Gabriel Thornfield, a widower whose rise mirrored the prodigal son's return, but tainted with suspicion. He arrived in '92 amid a blizzard's fury, his wagon a lone ark against the storm, 7 daughters clustered like fragile doves under canvas. His wife, felled by fever on the Oregon Trail, lay buried in unmarked prairie soil, a sacrifice to manifest destiny. Gabriel's face, etched with grief's deep lines, won the town's pity. They shared bread and shelter, igniting his ascent. From a humble dry goods stall, he built an empire. Shelves groaning with bolts of calico, tins of coffee, tools forged in Pittsburgh. Exclusive deals with mine owners, loans from shadowy eastern banks. His fortune swelled like a river in spring thaw. The mansion rose in '95, a Gothic behemoth of red brick and wrought iron, its stained glass windows depicting saints in agony, casting rainbow shards across polished oak floors. Wraparound porches creaked under evening breezes, where Gabriel smoked his pipe, eyes scanning the horizon as if awaiting judgment. But prosperity bred envy. Murmurs circled. How did a bereft immigrant amass such wealth? Connections to railroad barons? Or darker alliances? Rumors of late-night visitors, their coats hiding badges of corruption. In the summer of '99, tensions boiled. The panic of '93's echoes still rattled banks. Workers unionized under the Western Federation, demanding bread from tables laden with silver. Gabriel navigated this maelstrom, his store a neutral ground, yet his private parlor hosted strangers whose whispers smelled of sin. Deals that traded more than goods. The sisters, blooming like lilies and thorns, embodied virtue amid vice, each a facet of divine grace, their lives a testament to paternal devotion, yet shadowed by impending doom. Margaret, 26, the eldest shepherdess, taught in the clapboard schoolhouse where sunlight slanted through dusty panes, illuminating chalk-scrawled slates. Her voice, steady as scripture, wove lessons of arithmetic and ethics, urging pupils to question like Job in his trials. She lingered after bells, her hands gentle on tear-streaked faces, fostering minds starved for light. But her eyes held a quiet fire, a moral compass pointing toward justice, making her a thorn to those who profited from ignorance. Catherine, 24, channeled the creator's brush. In her attic studio, amid turpentine fumes and canvas stretched taut as conscience, she painted Montana's soul. Craggy peaks bathed in alpenglow, their hues a symphony of crimson and gold. Portraits of miners, faces lined like ancient parchments, revealing dignity in despair. Her exhibitions in the town hall drew crowds, gas lamps hissing as viewers pondered art's reflection of the human condition. Beauty amid brokenness, like Eden after the fall. She organized salons where poetry flowed, voices rising in harmony, binding the community in fleeting transcendence. The twins, Eleanor and Elizabeth, 22, mirrored each other like divine duality. Eleanor the bold Eve, Elizabeth the reflective Mary. Their needlework shop hummed with the whir of treadle machines, fabrics cascading in silken waterfalls. Velvets for gowns, linens for shrouds. It was a sanctuary where women confessed sins over seams, tears absorbed into hems. Eleanor's laughter rang like bells, negotiating prices with shrewd grace. Elizabeth listened, her silence a confessional, offering wisdom that soothed souls frayed by frontier hardships. Sarah, 20, sang with angelic timbre, her voice echoing in the Methodist chapel's vaulted rafters, where candle flames danced to hymns of redemption. She directed choirs, her arms conducting waves of melody that lifted hearts from earthly woes. Charity drives under her lead fed the famine-struck, clothed the naked, embodying Matthew's mandate. Her compassion was a balm, yet her eyes betrayed a depth, as if she sensed the gathering storm, a prophetic unease. Grace, 17, wielded numbers like Solomon's wisdom. In the store's backroom, ledger pages fluttered under her fingers, calculations swift as lightning strikes. She unraveled financial knots, spotting frauds that eluded elders, her mind a fortress against deceit. Gabriel leaned on her, but her acuity drew eyes, envy from men who saw threat in a woman's intellect. Rebecca, 14, the lamb among lions, radiated innocence. At the library's scarred oak tables, she read aloud to wide-eyed children, her voice weaving tales of wonder, banishing the mind's gloom. Her laughter bubbled like mountain springs, but her questions probed deeper. Why must families fracture? Could joy survive separation? Harbingers of fracture. As autumn deepened, portents multiplied. Gabriel's meetings intensified, silhouettes behind frosted glass, murmurs like incantations. The sisters' routines faltered. Margaret's lessons trailed into silence, her chalk hand trembling. Catherine's brush strokes aired, colors bleeding like wounds. The twins' whispers hushed at doorbells. Sarah's hymns cracked on high notes. Grace fumbled sums, eyes darting. Rebecca's stories ended abruptly, her gaze distant. On October 12th, the eve of oblivion, the day unfolded in eerie tableau. Dawn painted the sky in bruised purples, wind rattling shutters like restless spirits. Gabriel unlocked the store, his key scraping like a guilty conscience. Margaret trudged to school, her satchel heavy, greetings met with hollow smiles. Her coiffure askew as if sleep evaded her. Parents noted her pallor, a ghost in flesh. Catherine's garden easel stood sentinel, but her palette dried and used. She paced paths worn by worry, eyes fixed on the depot's smoke plume, as if it heralded doom. Neighbors spied her repainting obsessively, a loop of despair. The twins' shop opened to silence. Pins dropped audibly as they fumbled fabrics, customers sensing tension thick as fog. Whispers of fear escaped, plans unspoken, fates sealed. Sarah's church practice faltered. Notes soured, her stare through stained glass as if seeking salvation beyond. The Reverend's concern met deflection, her voice a veil over terror. Grace tallied errors in the ledger, her father's watch checks syncing with her unease, the air charged with unspoken dread. Rebecca's queries to the housekeeper probed exile's pain, her innocence cracking under invisible weight. By afternoon, the sisters converged on River Street, a procession solemn as a funeral march. Dr. Porter, horse reins slack, beheld them. Faces ashen, steps synchronized in grim resolve. No chatter, no glances, just forward motion, wind tugging at skirts like grasping hands. His hail drew only Rebecca's backward glance. Eyes wide with primordial fear, a silent scream echoing Cain's mark. It chilled him, a premonition of loss irredeemable. Twilight deepened, lamps igniting like watchful eyes. Timothy Fletcher, telegraph keys clicking Morse prayers, glimpsed them under the street lamp's halo. 7 figures huddled, shadows elongated, faces illuminated in golden flickers that masked inner turmoil. Their postures spoke volumes, arms linked in unity, yet trembling. Breaths visible in the chill, like souls escaping. What conference transpired there under night's cloak? Fletcher averted his eyes, sensing sacrilege. The click of his machine a futile ward against the encroaching void. As midnight neared, the mansion's lights dimmed one by one, windows blackening like closed eyes. The town slumbered, unaware that divine scales tipped, weighing sins of greed against innocence's light. The sisters retired, or so it seemed. Nightgowns folded, prayers whispered, perhaps invoking psalms for protection. But dawn revealed the rapture. Beds pristine, rooms echoing absence, a house turned sepulcher. This vanishing wasn't chance. It was culmination. Gabriel's wealth, rooted in tainted soil. Alliances with traffickers who viewed daughters as commodities, shipping them east like ore. Biblical echoes resound. Lot's flight from Sodom, but here, no pillar of salt, only hollow echoes. The federal seal on reports hid not mystery, but complicity. Officials entangled, profits shared. Human trafficking scourge, masked as opportunity, devoured the vulnerable, leaving families fractured like shattered commandments. Yet spiritual undercurrents pulse. Were the sisters martyrs, their purity a rebuke to corruption, or vessels of retribution, their absence a curse upon Selkirk? Townsfolk spoke of hauntings, whispers in wind, apparitions in mist, reminders that sin's wages are death. Redemption eludes, but reflection beckons. In our age, do such shadows linger? Traffickers in digital veils, greed's eternal guise. The legacy chills. 7 souls, symbols of lost Eden, demanding we confront the darkness within. Their story, a mirror to our own, guilt's burden, justice's delay. As leaves fell that autumn, so did illusions of progress, revealing the beast beneath. As the amber glow of the street lamp pooled on the weathered boardwalk, casting elongated shadows that twisted like tormented souls, Timothy Fletcher peered through the telegraph office's grimy window. The 7 Thornfield sisters stood in a formation rigid as ancient monoliths, their backs to the wind-swept street, faces turned toward the distant silhouette of the train depot where iron tracks vanished into the encroaching darkness. The Bitterroot Mountains brooded in the background, their snow-capped peaks gleaming faintly under a sickle moon, as if bearing witness to a ritual unspoken. Eleanor and Elizabeth, the twins, flanked the line like guardian angels fallen from grace, their identical postures a mirror of shared fate. Margaret at the fore, her chin lifted in defiant resolve, yet her hands clasped so tightly that knuckles whitened like exposed bone. Catherine beside her, fingers twitching as if aching for a brush to paint the horror unfolding. Sarah, Grace, and young Rebecca completed the procession, their breaths visible in the chill air, puffing like incense from a forbidden altar. No words passed between them, only the occasional rustle of silk skirts against the night, a sound fragile as cracking faith. Their attire spoke volumes of paradox. Elaborate gowns of velvet and lace, embroidered with threads that caught the light like captured stars, more suited to a grand ball in eastern salons than this dust-choked Montana outpost. Pearls dangled from necks like nooses of purity, brooches pinned over hearts beating with unspoken terror, hair coiled in elegant upsweeps, adorned with combs of ivory and silver, as if prepared for a ceremony where vows would bind not in love, but in chains. Fletcher, his quill hovering mid-message, felt a primal unease coil in his gut. This was no idle gathering. Their eyes, wide and unblinking, scanned the horizon with a blend of expectancy and horror, as if awaiting the horsemen of apocalypse. Resignation etched their features like scripture on stone tablets, brows furrowed in acceptance of divine decree, lips pressed thin against cries of rebellion. Fear lurked in the shadows beneath their eyes, dark as the abyss where sinners fall. 10 minutes later, when Fletcher glanced again, the spot was empty, the lamp's light illuminating only swirling dust motes, as if the sisters had been swallowed by the void, leaving behind an echo of spiritual desolation. The veil between that sighting and dawn's revelation shrouded the Thornfield mansion in mystery deeper than the mineshafts riddling Selkirk's underbelly. Gabriel Thornfield's testimony, later dissected like a heretic's confession, painted a portrait of normalcy that crumbled under scrutiny. He claimed retreat to his study at 10 sharp, the room's mahogany desk scarred from years of ledger scratches, illuminated by a single kerosene lamp whose flame danced like a soul in purgatory. Correspondence from the afternoon train, sealed envelopes bearing Chicago postmarks, lay spread before him, their contents a cipher of commerce and concealed sin. For 90 minutes, he pored over figures, quill dipping into ink black as midnight, updating records that chronicled his meteoric rise. Yet inconsistencies festered. Ink blots fresher than claimed, pages turned with haste, as if his mind wandered to darker bargains. Mrs. Caldwell, the housekeeper whose calloused hands had scrubbed every inch of that Victorian edifice, departed at her customary 10, her apron dusted with flour from supper's remnants, her cottage path wound through maple groves, leaves crunching underfoot like brittle bones. In testimony that would echo through courtrooms like a prophet's lament, she described the house's unnatural hush. A silence thick as fog rolling off the bitterroots, muffling even the creak of settling timbers. No laughter filtered from upper floors. No footsteps pattered like rain on tin roofs. The air hung heavy, scented with beeswax from polished banisters and the faint, acrid tang of extinguished candles. Absent were the evening rituals. No clatter of teacups in the kitchen where sisters convened, sharing whispers of dreams and duties. No rustle of fabrics laid out for morn. It was as if time had frozen, the household suspended in a biblical stasis, awaiting judgment's thunderclap. Gabriel ascended to his chamber at 11:30, or so he swore, locking doors with keys that jangled like chains of bondage, murmuring prayers in the family chapel where stained-glass saints gazed down in silent accusation. The master bedroom, vast and echoing, held the ghost of his departed wife. Her portrait on the wall, eyes following him like divine watchmen, bed vast as a sarcophagus where he claimed untroubled slumber. But the night's veil concealed machinations arcane. Between moonset and sunrise, when stars wheeled overhead like witnesses in heavenly court, the house transformed into a theater of shadows. Evidence whispered of coordinated exodus, or abduction veiled as choice. Beds untouched, linens taut as shrouds, nightgowns suspended like spectral husks, untouched by flesh. Yet rooms bore marks of violation. Drawers eased open by gloved hands, contents sifted like wheat from chaff, seeking not gold but secrets, letters of affection, diaries of doubt, tokens of innocence that might indict the guilty. Dawn broke on October 13th with a frost that silvered rooftops like hoarfrost on sinners' brows, the sun rising reluctant over peaks that pierced the sky like spears of retribution. Mrs. Caldwell's key scraped the lock, door swinging inward on hinges oiled silent, expecting the cacophony of awakening. Pots clanging, voices rising in morning psalms. She met instead a void profound as the grave. The grandfather clock ticked in solitary vigil, its pendulum swinging like fate's inexorable blade. No aroma of brewing coffee, no shuffle from above. Her heart quickened, a premonition slithering cold as serpents in Eden. The kitchen gleamed pristine, counters bare, hearth cold, devoid of the late-night repast's crumbs, where sisters once bonded over herbal teas steaming like offerings to forgotten gods. Ascending the staircase, treads groaning under her weight like confessions extracted, she reached the second floor. Hallway dim, doors sealed as tombs. Knocking on Margaret's elicited no stir. The knob turned cold in her palm. Inside, order mocked reality. Bed immaculate, pillows plumped as if awaiting resurrection. Nightgown draped, fabric whispering untouched purity. Dressing table arrayed with brush, comb, tomes of wisdom. Yet skewed subtly, books misaligned like faltering faith, papers rifled by intrusive eyes. A chill wind ghosted through, though windows latched, as if spirits had passed, leaving spiritual residue. Catherine's sanctum amplified the blasphemy. Canvases stacked neat as scripture scrolls, brushes aligned in military rows. Alien to her whirlwind creativity, where chaos birthed beauty like God's form from void. Paints capped tight, no splatters marring floors. An imposed sanctity that screamed desecration. The twins' shared haven revealed deeper wounds. Symmetry disrupted, drawers probed, belongings reordered by alien hands. Folds imperfect, like covenants broken. Mirrors reflected empty space, doubling the absence like multiplied sins. Third floor crescendoed the horror. Sarah's room, hymnals undisturbed yet pages thumbed. Grace's ledgers open to entries that betrayed no sleep. Rebecca's childish treasures, dolls, books, examined and replaced, her bed a cradle of loss. Mrs. Caldwell's screams rent the air, a wail echoing Job's anguish, drawing neighbors like moths to flame. They burst in, faces pale as shrouds, witnessing the profane. Gabriel, roused from feigned slumber, stumbled forth in nightshirt, hair disheveled like a prophet's mane, calling names that bounced off walls like unanswered prayers. He toured the sepulchre house, denial crumbling to despair or guise thereof. 7 voids, each a testament to betrayal. Sheriff William Harding, badge glinting in morning light, arrived amid the throng, his boots thudding on porch like judgment's gavel. A veteran of frontier justice, rustlers hanged, brawls quelled. He faced enigma incarnate. No shattered glass, no bloodied floors. Locks intact from within, as if phantoms had spirited the souls. Grounds unmarred by prints, despite nights dew softening earth like receptive clay. Interiors spoke of methodical inquisition. Possessions scrutinized, refold with care almost reverent. Yet nothing absent. Jewels sparkled untouched. Coins lay in drawers like Judas silver. Documents perused but left, as if the seeker hunted essence, not matter. Harding's canvas expanded. Interrogations under gas lamps flickering like inquisitorial torches. Witnesses emerged from shadows. Strangers in tailored suits alighting trains. Their valises heavy with secrets, conferring in hushed parlors then vanishing at dawn. No saloon visits, no church attendance. Isolation deliberate as lepers. Telegraph logs chronicled coded missives, numerals and letters dancing like occult runes, dispatched by Gabriel to eastern hives of vice. Chicago's underbelly, New York's gilded dens, San Francisco's fog-shrouded ports. Volumes surged pre-disappearance, a crescendo of conspiracy. Banker Charles Whitman, spectacles slipping on sweat-slick nose, yielded under pressure. Ledgers unveiling Gabriel's withdrawals. Gold coins clinking like damned soul's toll, timed post-visitor. Deposits from phantom sources swelled accounts beyond mercantile bounds. Whispers of illicit veins tapped. Mining frauds, railroad grafts, echoing biblical usury condemned. As winter's grip tightened, snow blanketing Selkirk like a shroud of forgetfulness, the tale metastasized. Newspapers nationwide devoured it. Headlines screaming vanished virgins of the West. Etchings depicting sisters as ethereal martyrs. Theories swirling like blizzards. Elopement, madness, supernatural rapture. Public fascination mirrored ancient tales of lost tribes. A modern parable of innocence devoured by progress maw. Federal tendrils extended. Inspector Marcus Reed, Justice Department sleuth, descended like an avenging seraph. Eyes sharp as eagles, mustache trimmed precise. He dissected records with scalpel logic. Gabriel's empire unraveled. Wealth's roots in Rocky Mountain Development Company, a hydra of corruption. Mineral rights seized via coercion. Contracts inked in blood's ink. Connections spiderweb to territorial politicos. Eastern magnates. A syndicate trading not just land, but lives. Trafficking's shadow. Daughters bartered for fortune. Echoing Pharaoh's enslavement. Spiritual threads wove through. Were the sisters' offerings on greed's altar, their purity a rebuke to paternal sin? Gabriel's chapel prayers hollow, his success a Faustian pact? Absences haunted Selkirk. Apparitions in fog, whispers in wind, as if souls lingered, demanding atonement. Redemption's path obscured, yet legacy endures. A cautionary gospel against avarice, where divine justice strikes silent as night. The conspiracy deepened. Reed unearthed ledgers linking Gabriel to human brokers, girls funneled east as opportunities. Maids, brides, worse, veiled in progress cloak. Sisters' finery that eve, garb for auction, dread their foreknowledge of betrayal. Searches not for theft, but evidence of resistance. Diaries burned, letters concealed, townsfolk reflected. Minds silver mirrored souls tarnish. Railroads advance a serpent's trail. Biblical symbolism abounded. 7 sisters like 7 churches of revelation. Warnings unheeded. Gabriel's isolation post-vanishing. Eyes hollow as abysses, suggested guilt's erosion. A Cain wandering. Yet hope flickered. Rumors of sightings, eastern whispers of Thornfield blood persisting. But truth buried. Files sealed like apocalyptic scrolls, awaiting end times reveal. This chapter of shadows illuminates eternal truths. Sin's wages paid in loss, redemption through reckoning. As Selkirk's lamps dimmed, so did illusions. Greed's facade cracked, revealing the void where faith should dwell. As the veil of secrecy began to fray under Inspector Marcus Reed's relentless scrutiny, the Rocky Mountain Development Company emerged not as a beacon of progress, but as a labyrinthine beast, its tentacles coiling through shadows of deceit. This phantom entity slithered via a maze of ghost corporations, dummy fronts, and veiled proxies, rendering its overlords as ethereal as wraiths in the mist-shrouded Bitterroots. Reed's lanterns flickered over ledgers yellowed like ancient sins, revealing boundless coffers funneled from unseen abysses, perhaps eastern vaults swollen with railroad gold, or mining barons' blood-stained fortunes. What crystallized was a systematic plunder. Vast swaths of western bounty, timber thickets whispering secrets, silver veins pulsing like corrupted arteries, land ripe as Eden before the fall, seized through pacts with local stewards who traded souls for silver. Bribes flowed like poisoned rivers, corrupting sheriffs whose badges tarnished under moonlight, judges whose gavels echoed hollow justice, and merchants whose scales tipped toward damnation. Gabriel Thornfield's entanglement traced to his '92 arrival, when investment capital bloomed in his accounts like manna from a false heaven. This infusion, masked as benevolence, propelled his store from humble shack to empire, shelves groaning under Eastern imports, his mansion rising like a monument to hubris. In reciprocity, he bartered intelligence. Maps of mineral claims etched in betrayal, rosters of landowners vulnerable as lambs, whispers of political winds that could uproot fortunes. His role, a Faustian scribe, chronicled Selkirk's underbelly, feeding the beast that devoured the frontier's promise. Spiritual echoes resounded. Gabriel as Judas, his 30 pieces manifesting in prosperity. Yet each coin weighted with impending reckoning. Divine justice loomed, for as Proverbs warns, the wicked earn deceptive wages, and Thornfield's wealth built a tower destined to crumble. Winter's icy shroud descended upon Selkirk in late '99, frost etching windows like accusatory script, winds howling dirges through skeletal aspens. The disappearance's scar festered, transforming the town from hearth of camaraderie to hive of suspicion. Families, haunted by federal agents probing lanterns and the specter of complicity, packed wagons under cover of night, wheels creaking like guilty consciences over frozen ruts. They fled to distant valleys, carrying tales of the vanished like forbidden gospels. Newcomers trickled in, hardened prospectors with eyes like flint, merchants scenting opportunity in the void, indifferent to the ghosts lingering in attics and alleys. Gabriel retreated into his mansion's gloom, a hermit king in a palace of echoes. Porch swings creaked unmanned, stained glass saints casting judgmental hues across empty halls. He ventured out only to the cemetery, where 7 marble sentinels stood sentinel. Blank slabs etched with names like wounds, no dates to mark passage, as if time itself recoiled from the truth. His store, once buzzing with barter and banter, sold to outsiders whose crisp ledgers erased his legacy. They unearthed voids, records torched to ashen hearths, files spirited away like stolen relics, leaving enigmas where fortunes once tallied. The sisters' essence evaporated like morning dew under relentless sun. Gowns folded into trunks, dust motes dancing in shafts of light piercing attic gloom. Paintings stacked against walls, colors fading like forgotten prayers. Seamstress tools rusted in silence, needles poised as if awaiting phantom hands. Community threads unraveled. Schoolhouse echoes of Margaret's lessons silenced by rote drills. Catherine's salon supplanted by crude gatherings. Twins' shop a mere alteration den. Sarah's hymns drowned in secular tunes. Grace's ledgers balanced by lesser minds. Rebecca's laughter a myth whispered to children. Names faded from lips, supplanted by progress mantra, as residents buried curiosity under ambition's soil. By spring 1901, Selkirk reborn. A impersonal sprawl of strangers, boardwalks trod by boots chasing gold, saloons echoing hollow toasts. This metamorphosis mirrored the West's crucifixion. Frontier dreams nailed to corporate crosses, equality's promise bled dry by Eastern vultures viewing land as carcass, people as expendable dust. Biblical parallels abounded, Babylon's fall, where greed erected idols, only for divine winds to scatter them. 2 decades and 3 years later, in the grit-choked spring of 1922, Chicago's South Side birthed a resurrection of horrors. Amid the demolition of a derelict warehouse, its brick facade crumbling like false facades of respectability. Workers' sledgehammers breached a concealed sanctum, walled off like a pharaoh's tomb. Dust billowed, revealing iron filing cabinets rusted as chains of bondage, crates swollen with ledgers, artifacts exhumed from oblivion. Amid this trove of iniquity, 7 sepia portraits, each capturing a Thornfield sister in poised elegance. Studio lights etching features matured beyond Selkirk's timeline. Accompanying dossiers, meticulous as Satan's ledger, catalog traits. Margaret's intellect sharp as thorns, now etched with lines of endured trials. Catherine's artistry, eyes shadowed by sorrow's veil. Twins separated, their symmetry fractured by divergent paths, one bold, one withdrawn. Sarah's piety, face a mask of melancholy. Grace's acuity dulled to resignation. Rebecca's vibrance quenched, beauty a hollow shell. Ages betrayed post-vanishing capture. 30s for Margaret, mid-20s for others. Proof of lives extended in chains. Detective John Sullivan, badge gleaming under warehouse bulbs flickering like infernal flames, seized these relics amid a broader crusade against syndicated shadows. The archive unveiled a leviathan, domestic placement services, a euphemism cloaking human barter. Records, penned in precise script, chronicled decades of predation. Since 1885, frontiers ravaged like locust-plagued fields. Modus operandi. Scouts infiltrated isolates, pinpointing families bowed by poverty's yoke, daughters blooming amid thorns. Fronts masqueraded as benevolence. Employment bureaus promising urban polish, matrimonial agencies vowing prosperous unions, academies feigning enlightenment, charities extending poisoned hands. Sullivan's probe dissected the serpent. Initial overtures by suave emissaries, credentials forged as alibis, proposals glittering like fool's gold. Families, ensnared by visions of elevation, invested souls and savings, dependencies woven tighter than spider silk. Vulnerabilities exploited, debts as levers, ambitions as bait, culminating in extraction. Daughters whisked under pretexts of opportunity, families fed fables of voluntary flight. Spiritual undertones chilled. This as modern babble, confusing tongues of truth with lies, or Pharaoh's enslavement, daughters as bricks in empire's walls. For Thornfield's, archives dated 93. Gabriel's ascent greased by syndicate oil, his role evolving from informant to procurer. Correspondence, ink faded like remorse, charted descent. Minor tips escalating to coordination, influence peddled for patronage. By 99, federal hounds baying, he became liability, demanded tribute, his own bloodline as collateral. Letters bared torment. Paternal love clashing with terror's grip, threats of ruin veiled in civility. Alternatives pleaded. Fortunes proffered, surrogates suggested, flight fantasized, all rebuffed. Final missives, dated eve of eclipse, resigned to abyss, clinging to delusions of daughters' gilded cages. Wed to magnates, virtues commodified. But pause amid the abyss. If this unraveling grips your spirit, share with kin who crave shadowed lore. Like to fuel our flame, subscribe for chronicles that pierce veils. Together, unearth the culmination of this saga, where betrayal's roots entwine with exploitation's thorns. Revelations detonated like divine thunder, galvanizing nationwide manhunts. Sullivan's cache not only resurrected Thornfield's, but indicted an octopus of vice. Tentacles corrupting badges, benches, ballots. Bribes documented. Judges blinded. Sheriffs muzzled. Marshals monetized. Silencing cries. Quashing quests. Pinnacle shocks. Pillars of society. Politicos preaching piety. Tycoons touting values. Immersed in mire. Facilitating flesh trade while sermonizing sanctity. Scope sprawled. Over 300 souls trafficked 85 to 10, from Montana's crags to California's shores. Ages 14 to 26, selected for allure, acumen, adaptability, families fractured for profit. Railroads' iron sinews expedited exodus. Isolation's curse thwarted pursuit. Telegraph silent, distances devouring hope. Societal fissures exploited. Penury's pinch, solitude's sting, futures fogged. Offers as serpent's apples, promising paradise, delivering perdition. Selkirk fractured anew. Factions demanding reckoning versus those dreading downfall. Prosperity's fruits poisoned by complicity. Mayor, banker, merchants ensnared, pockets lined to bury truths. Cemetery scrutiny unearthed Gabriel's cipher. Headstones dates not deaths, but nuptial nooses. Placements pinpointed, memorials as mocks. Knowledge concealed, fiction fostered to evade vengeance, transmuting victim to villain, accomplice in daughter's doom. Legacy lingers. Syndicates fall birthed reforms, yet shadows persist. Spiritual reckoning. Gabriel as fallen patriarch, town as Sodom's echo, sisters as martyrs whose absence curses greed. Redemption, in reflection, guarding innocence against avarice's allure, lest histories will crush anew. In the gray autumn of 1927, a broken man checked into a cheap Denver boarding house under the name G. Thomas. 3 days later, the maid found him hanging from the water pipe, coat still buttoned, boots polished, a single sheet of paper pinned to his chest like a final confession nailed to a church door. The note was addressed to no one and to everyone. I sold my daughters for silver and for silence. I was told they would be cared for. I was lied to and I lied to myself. If these words ever reach the light, tell Margaret I begged for her forgiveness every night I still had a soul left to beg with. Tell the others I was too much a coward to save them. There is no penance large enough. Only the rope. Gabriel Thornfield died believing the secret died with him. He was wrong, because in the spring of 1922, federal agents kicked in doors from San Francisco to Boston in the largest anti-trafficking raid in American history. What they dragged into the light was not a defunct frontier racket. It was a living, breathing hydra that had simply traded buckboards for limousines, mining camps for tenements, and placement opportunities for the polished lie of modern companionship agencies. The old wolf had learned new tricks, and the Thornfield sisters, those 7 ghosts every Montana child grew up whispering about, were still inside the cage. Margaret, once the proud schoolteacher of Selkirk, was found in Cleveland under the name Mary Patterson. 49 years old, silver threading the same chestnut hair that once caught bitterroot sunlight. She lived in a brick mansion that looked like freedom from the street and felt like a velvet-lined prison from the inside. Her husband, Harrison Pembroke, steel magnate and church deacon, had chosen her from a leather-bound catalog the way a man chooses a prize mare. 3 children slept in the East Wing, children who called her mother, but had been taught she was an orphan with no past worth mentioning. Hidden beneath floorboards, wrapped in oilskin, were 23 years of journals written in Margaret's precise teacher's hand. Dates, names, threats, bribes. She had waited a lifetime for someone to come looking. When the agents finally did, she did not cry. She simply closed the journal, handed it over and said, "Start with page 1. The Republic deserves to know what its progress cost." Catherine, the painter whose Montana skies once bled color across canvas, was discovered in Milwaukee as Caroline Phillips. Her husband, Augustus Richardson, had sold her landscapes as his own masterpieces while keeping her locked in an attic studio with the windows nailed shut. The paintings the agents carried out were technically flawless and unbearable to look at. Mountains that wept blood-red snow. Skies filled with 7 empty nooses swaying against a moon like a dead eye. She stood in the doorway in a paint-spattered smock, 47 years old, staring at the agents as if they were apparitions. When they told her Catherine Thornfield was free, she whispered, "That girl died a long time ago, but I remember her name." The twins had been separated the way you break a wishbone, deliberately, cruelly, to make sure neither ever felt whole again. Eleanor, now Ellen Whitfield in St. Louis, rocked in a darkened parlor repeating her sister's name like a rosary. Elizabeth, living as Eliza Henderson in Chicago, flinched at loud noises and kept a packed suitcase under her bed that she had never once opened in 23 years. Both had been told the other was dead. When agents arranged the first telephone call between them, the line went silent for so long the operator thought the connection had failed. Then came a sound no one in the room would ever forget. 2 grown women screaming each other's names across 4 states, as if the continent itself had cracked open and let childhood pour back in. Sarah, The singer whose voice once lifted the rafters of Selkirk's little Methodist church never lived to hear freedom's knock. She died in Detroit in 1905, officially of pneumonia, unofficially of a husband who believed wives were like hymnals, meant to be opened only when company was present, and closed the rest of the time. Her grave marker read, Sarah Morrison, beloved wife. Federal agents added a second marker the day they closed the file, and beloved sister stolen, not lost. Grace, the mathematician who could balance a ledger before she could braid her own hair, lasted until 1909. Forced to cook books for a Chicago embezzler, she fought back the only way she knew how, by slipping microscopic errors into columns of numbers, praying someone somewhere would notice. They noticed. She died in childbirth, denied a doctor because assets do not require medical care, only maintenance. The child, a boy, was raised to believe his mother had died of natural causes. He was 23 years old the day federal agents knocked on his dormitory door at the University of Chicago and handed him a photograph of a 17-year-old girl with his eyes and his smile. He did not speak for 3 days. And Rebecca, the baby, the laughter, the 14-year-old who still believed in fairy tales, never made it to any marriage altar at all. Too young to be sold immediately, she was shuttled between holding houses like a package no one wanted to claim. By the time she turned 20, tuberculosis had done what the trafficker's clients would not. It unmarried her forever. She died in a charity ward in San Francisco, clutching a rag doll she had kept since Montana. The doll's dress was still pinned with a faded blue ribbon Rebecca had worn the night she disappeared. The trials that followed were less courtroom drama than national exorcism. Marcus Peton, suave, silver-tongued architect of the entire nightmare, was dragged into court in a $500 suit and not 1 ounce of remorse. He called it relocation services for the betterment of young womanhood. The prosecutor called it slavery with better stationery. 17 of his lieutenants went down with him. Dozens more. Senators, governors, federal judges watched their names scorch across front pages and slipped away into country estates or sudden ill health abroad. Some secrets, apparently, are still too expensive to print. Margaret testified for 9 days. She never raised her voice. She simply told the truth, fact by fact, the way she once taught children their sums. When Peton's attorney tried to paint her as a hysterical female exaggerating for attention, she looked at him the way a schoolteacher looks at a boy who has lied about his homework, and the man actually dropped his pencil. The jury was out less than 2 hours. Afterward, Margaret refused to return to Cleveland. She moved to Washington, D.C., testified before Congress, and spent the rest of her life drafting the first federal laws against human trafficking. Every year on October 13th, she placed 7 white roses on the steps of the Capitol and never explained why. Those who knew simply stepped around them. Catherine painted one final canvas, a group portrait of 7 sisters standing beneath a Montana sky so fierce it hurt to look at. She signed it with all 7 names, then burned every other painting she had ever been forced to create. The ashes, she said, were the only honest work Augustus Richardson ever sold. Eleanor and Elizabeth bought a small house in Missoula, 2 old women who finished each other's sentences and kept the porch light burning every single night for the rest of their lives. And in Selkirk, the mansion came down in 1925. They say the wrecking ball swung for 3 days and never made a sound, like the house itself was already a ghost. On the empty lot, they raised 1 stone. To Margaret, Catherine, Eleanor, Elizabeth, Sarah, Grace, and Rebecca. Stolen by greed, remembered by truth. May God forgive what men would not. The frontier promised a new Eden. Instead, it delivered a warning carved in 7 names. Progress that feeds on innocence is only predation wearing a better suit. Gabriel Thornfield wanted to give his daughters the world. In the end, the world took them and made him watch. Their story is finished. But the ledger is still open. Somewhere tonight, another catalog is being printed. Another desperate parent is being told their child will be better off. Another door is closing on a life that will never be the same. Listen for the echo of 7 sisters walking across an empty bedroom floor in the dead of night. They are still asking the same question Selkirk never answered. How much is a soul worth? When no one is looking.